Good evening, everyone, whether you are here or whether you are here, and good to hear that Mom's eye is doing better. So hopefully, if she's not watching, I'll let you know that Kay's eye is on the mend, and she got good news from her doctor today and others. So if you are listening, Mom, I'm glad you're much better. Well, we just spent some time in prayer. Now, should I put everybody on the spot and ask you about your prayer life? No, okay, I won't do that. What comes to mind when you think of prayer? What thoughts, what images, ideas, words, stories, people?
You go. Conversation with God.
A conversation with God. Good.
Mine was kind of along the same lines. There's a verse in Thessalonians, is it pray without ceasing?
That's what
And yeah, and you know, like just throughout the day, I don't stop for like a half hour and pray. It's just like sentence prayers and throughout the day.
Yeah, a constant conversation, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I do.
I suspect many of us, it's that kind of, you get up, you say a few words, as the day goes, good, bad, otherwise, prayers of request and prayers of pain, prayers of joy, or you see somebody say, "Oh, I think I was supposed to pray for them," right? I remember that now, But yeah, what role does prayer play in the life of one who follows Jesus? Is it a command? Is it an option? Is it? It's a command, yeah. And we often see Jesus praying. So this should come no surprise to us tonight as we work through these final stories or the final accounts of just before he goes to the triumphal entry that he teaches on prayer. Very often these 6 stories are told as kind of a disjointed 6 stories, as if Luke was, like last minute at Bonanza, he had his bean salad, his potato salad, his french fries, and just, right, we forgot about that, and he kind of threw the last 6 elements together. I want to put to you tonight that these 6 stories are actually all tied together. They're all about prayer. They're 3 teachings on prayer and then 3 real life stories that illustrate the teaching. And so you have before you this little note with the 3 teachings on the one column, the story of the widow, the tax collector, and the story of parents and children, and then the events of the young ruler, the blind man, and Zacchaeus. And my hope tonight is that you see that this is a parallel structure. It's 3 and 3. That the story of the widow is tied to the story of the young ruler, the story of the tax collector is the story of the blind man, and the story of the blessing of the children at the hands of the parents is actually the story of Zacchaeus. So hopefully that's got your attention tonight. So I think, and then there's one last story or one last teaching that Jesus gives us, and that is, what do we do until he returns? Because they're saying, is the kingdom now? And Jesus says, well, I have to die first. And then they say, yeah, but what do we do until the kingdom? And so he gives us last set of instructions about this. This first one is the story of the unjust judge, and this is one of those how much more stories. Jesus says, if you do this, how much more will God your Father do this? So if your son asks you for a piece of bread, how much more will your Father give you the Holy Spirit, is what Jesus says. So it starts off with one of the how much more will Jesus do, or will the Father do? At the beginning of chapter 18, does your Bible have a little note? Does it say anything that's going to introduce the ideas? Parable on prayer. Yep. That was a nice twins moment there, by the way. Harmony, yeah. Verse 1, now he was telling them a parable to show them that they ought to pray at all times, just as you earlier on said, praying at all times, constantly, right? And not to lose heart. Because what do we tend to do when we pray? Easily for us to lose heart, right? I go through our book, it's 2 years now of prayer requests, and look back and think, when did we stop praying for that? Well, sometimes we stop praying because things were better. We've got Bonnie's dad here and others, and sometimes we lose heart, right? We've been praying for Anson's eyes for a long time. Look at that. You two are in here. Henry, that we must have been praying for you. Dylan must have brought you earlier on, or someone brought you. So this is the opening parable. So Shelley, would you read verses 2 and 3 for us?
He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared about men. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, grant me justice against my adversary.
All right. This is a bit of an awkward parable because who is the unjust judge in the parable that's being beseeched or pleaded with?
Someone who didn't fear God.
Yeah, and yet this is God, right? In the parable, this is actually God. So God is not the unjust judge who doesn't believe in God. Remember, this is a how much more story. But who's the one praying?
A widow.
The widow. All right, and what was she praying for?
Justice.
Justice. If on your little notes there, underneath the word widow by that little line, she was praying for justice. So what should we pray for?
Justice.
Justice. I think that is a fair prayer constantly. So the widow says, give me justice. And what happens? Ethan, you want to read verse 4?
For some time he refused, but he finally said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care what people think.
May as well read verse 6 as well, please.
Yet
Sorry, verse
because
5.
this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't eventually come and attack me.
Oh, I like that translation. She might come and attack you. So Jesus says, remember to do what when it's in prayer? Persist, right? So this widow isn't getting justice, and she keeps praying, and she keeps praying. Do you ever pray for justice? And it feels like it never happens? You know, we see court cases, or we see individuals, we see people struggling. We say, you know, God, where's the justice in this world? We look around the world, and we see the world's not a just place. And we pray, we keep beseeching God, bring about justice, bring about justice. And he says, so why does the judge answer her?
Because she wouldn't stop.
She's persistent.
Because she's persistent, right? Now, remember, how much more will an unrighteous, godless judge who will finally yield to a woman who's nagging him, how much more will God? And that's the point of this parable. It's one of those how much more. And the Lord said, Joyce, you want to read 6, 7, and 8 for us?
And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?
Curious little moment there, right? So Jesus says, how long are we supposed to pray for justice? Keep praying. Persevere and pray, and God will be the author of justice. He will bring about justice, right? Interesting, though, when will he bring about justice according to verse 8?
When he comes.
When he comes. It's tied into the second coming. Does justice occur within this lifetime?
Sometimes.
Sometimes yes, but a lot of times no. But when will ultimate justice come? When he returns, right? So Jesus is already alluding to the second coming in this little moment. He says, and when the Son of Man comes, he's going to wonder, but the Son of Man is coming, and by virtue of this whole paragraph, I believe he's saying that the Son of Man will bring him justice. So the first thing we're supposed to do with prayer is persevere in prayer for justice, because justice will come. And when it comes, it will come speedily when the Son of Man comes. All right, so that's the first teaching. So what's Jesus' first teaching on prayer?
Be persistent.
Be persistent.
And I guess you have to also be patient, because if it's first going to happen, when the Son of Man comes, you could be praying a long time
Yeah.
and never see that. Prayer answered.
Does persistence and patience go together?
Probably.
What do you think? Yeah, they sort of go together, right? A persistent person should be patient, but a persistent person isn't always patient, are they? No. Have you ever dealt with children, who are persistent? They're not always patient. But a patient person should always be persistent. Is that fair? Okay. All right, so number one, the story of the widow is persistent prayer for justice. All right, let's go into the second parable. Verse 9, Donna?
And he also told this parable to certain ones who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and viewed others with contempt.
All right, so who's Jesus talking about?
Pharisees?
The Pharisees, yeah, the teachers of the law who are very self-righteous in their attitudes and opinions.
He was proud.
Proud, exactly. Thank you. Oh. So, this is the story of two people going out to pray. Should we close that door? Is the sunlight shining on you? Okay. All right. You're doing so well. Would you do verse 10, please?
Sure. Two men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax gatherer.
All right. So we have very common, two people are off to pray, a tax gatherer, and we know what's the social status of a tax gatherer. Yeah, they are treasonous people, right? And the Pharisee would be high on the totem.
Yeah.
What's that?
Self-righteous.
Self-righteous, exactly. Jesus says that they were righteous and viewed others with contempt. So, Shirley, verse 11, please. Sure, no problem.
The Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself. God, I thank you that I am not like the other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like the tax collector.
You're doing well. Read 12 as well.
I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get.
Good. This guy is truly righteous. I mean, not truly, but he's coming across as very, very righteous. So let me read to you. This is from the Talmud. And this is one of the rabbi's prayers of the Talmud. I give thanks to thee, O Lord my God, that thou hast set my portion with those who sit in the house of learning, and thou hast not set my portion with those who sit in the street. For I rise early, and they rise early. But I rise early for words of the Torah, and they rise early for frivolous talk. I labor, and they labor. But I labor and receive a reward, and they labor and do not receive a reward. I run, and they run. But I run to the life of the future world, and they run to the pit of destruction. Very similar prayer here. So what is this individual pleased that he does? Why does he feel self-righteous?
Because he fasts twice a week.
Eg-
The 10.
Exactly. Now, it's interesting, within Judaic law, you only had to fast once a year, the day of the Yom Kippur. You were supposed to fast. But he fasts how often?
Twice a week.
Oh, man, he's above and beyond, right? Like he's fasting 104 times a year. And he is paying, he's tithing. Turn with me to Deuteronomy. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Chapter 14. Deuteronomy 14. So you were supposed to tithe in the Old Covenant. And Deuteronomy 14:22 gives us the simplicity of the instruction of the tithe. You shall surely tithe on the produce from which you sow, which comes out of the field. So you tithe on your harvest. So that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to tithe. And if you keep going to verse 23, you shall eat in the presence of the Lord your God at the place where he chooses to establish his name, the tithe of your grain. Here's what you're supposed to tithe on. Grain, new wine, oil, the firstborn of your herds, and the firstborn of your flocks. So the basic agricultural products, right? But what does he tithe on? What does he say in verse 12
Oh, yeah, 10.
of chapter 18? Back to Luke.
Gives a tenth of all he gets.
Of all I get. So the law said tithe on these items, and he says, well, I'm so righteous, I tithe on everything I get. So he's so above and beyond. He fasts all the time, he tithes, right down to every shekel. So that's our boy. He's not doing great, although he thinks he is. What's the focus of his prayer?
Me?
Yeah, me. Look how great I am. Look what I do. So he's thinking he's what in his own eyes?
Very righteous.
Yeah, he's righteous, right? He's a pretty good guy. He's a righteous man. Meanwhile, the story shifts. Myrtle, if you would read verse 13 for us.
But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner.
That's a very simple prayer. The word mercy there is the word atonement, the mercy seat. He basically says, let thine anger be removed. It's the same word that when we talk about the mercy seat and the Ark of the Covenant. So he's saying, oh Lord, make atonement to me. Let your anger be removed from you. So what is the tax collector praying for in our little notes in front of us here?
Mercy?
Mercy, yeah. So the widow persistently prays for mercy. The tax collector, what adjective would we put in front of his word mercy? If the widow is persistently praying, the tax collector is, what's his prayer like?
Very humble.
Yeah, he's humbly praying, isn't he? I like humbly praying. Yeah. So if she's persistent, he's humble. So Jesus says, how should we pray?
Persistently and humbly.
Persistently and humbly, justice and mercy. And if we pick up verse 14, Myrtle, you're doing great. Verse 14.
I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted.
Good. The widow prayed for justice, and she got justice. The tax collector prayed for mercy, and he got mercy. That's the beginnings of Jesus' teaching on prayer. Pray for justice. Pray for mercy. If you pray persistently for justice, justice will be granted. If you pray humbly for mercy, God will give you mercy.
It's almost like how you pray in reality, it can be what the outcome will be too. Like, I know
Yeah.
that as but like, cause he's praying humbly, he
Yeah.
gets mercy. And because she's praying persistently, she gets justice.
So it's not only the prayer, it's the way they pray is instrumental, right? So how did the Pharisee pray? Proudly, arrogantly, right? Yeah. And he did not go home justified. Even though by his actions, he kept the law, right? He tithed, he fasted. He should have been justified by his actions, according to the law. But what negated or what defeated his keeping of the law?
His heart wasn't right.
His arrogance, right? So he kept the law, but he was not justified because he was arrogant. The tax collector didn't keep the law, but was justified because he was humble. This kind of inverts the story, right? Because by the legal procedures, or by the law, keeping of the law, the Pharisee should have been justified, but he was not, because of his attitude, or his heart attitude, right? He who humbles himself will be exalted, and he who exalts himself will be humbled. All right. So that seems like the end of the prayer, but I think it's not. And stay with me on here. All right. Because, Harlan, you want to read verse 15?
One day some mothers brought their babies to him to touch and bless him, but the disciples told him to go away.
Good. So one day, some people, did you say mothers? Or some people?
Yes, mothers brought their babies.
That's interesting, eh? Because the they there is masculine, and the masculine is just a general term, just means people.
This one said people.
Yeah, it's probably just people, right? But so people were bringing their babies to him so that he would touch them. What were they doing with Jesus? Remember, our theme is prayer. In effect.
Well, they want to pray for their children.
Yeah, they were saying, please will you bless my children? Which is a prayer, right? Anybody ever pray that God would bless your children? Yeah, so they beseech Jesus. They come to him and they say, come and bless my children. Come, and this is a very traditional rabbinic practice of rabbis blessing infants. There's nothing unusual about people bringing a child to a rabbi to be blessed. But the disciples, do we know why the disciples rebuke them?
Probably didn't want to bother Jesus.
Yeah, we don't really know their motives, right? We'd have to read into it at some level. But yeah, maybe they didn't want to be bothered. We don't know. We don't want to read into it or read the wrong thing. But for whatever reason, they shoo them on their way. Harlan, you're doing great. Verse 16.
Then Jesus called the children over to him and said to the disciples, let the little children come to me. Never send them away, for the kingdom of God belongs to men who have hearts as trusting as those little children.
Good. All right, so if the parents are praying, what are they praying? That Jesus would bless them, right? And what was the answer to their prayer? I know I'm pushing the edges of this one a bit.
Well, Jesus says the kingdom belongs to them.
That's right, yeah. They received the kingdom. So the little children received what? The kingdom. I mean, it's a metaphor, right? So if we say the widow prayed persistently for justice, the tax collector prayed humbly for mercy and received mercy, the parents prayed, they beseeched Jesus. How? There's no adjective here, but let's make one up.
They could have been humbly or they could have been persistent.
They could be both. Exactly, Shirley. Yeah, I throw either word though. Right. So they prayed their children would be blessed. And they received the kingdom. So the widow got justice, the tax collector got mercy, and the innocent received the kingdom. All right. This is going to all line up by the end. And again, I'm pushing the definition of prayer here, but I think it fits because it says, and they were. This is all in the context of parables on prayer and teachings on prayer. So I'm going to put to you that this is actually a lesson on praying, saying, please, bless the innocent. And Jesus says, you know what? If you come before me like the innocent, you will receive the kingdom. Don't stop people from coming to me. All right. So that's the three teachings I want to put to you. Justice, mercy, and prayer for the kingdom or prayer for blessing. I'm losing my notes. I'm ahead of myself here.
I have one more line.
Oh, go ahead, Harlan.
Anyone who doesn't have the kind of faith will never get within the kingdom's gates.
So we could say the parents came faithfully. Yeah, I like that. Pray and faith. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're working on the edges of this a little bit, but all right. Okay, so I put to you, there's three people here. What do they all have in common? What do the widow, the children, and the tax collector all have in common?
They realize their need for
Good.
God.
They're all in need. Good. What else do they have in common?
They went to Jesus for their need.
They all go to Jesus to their need. They come forward. Yeah.
They're not Pharisees, like they're not that higher echelon of
Good.
religious.
So they're all what? Work on that. They're all humble. They're all powerless. Right? So we get, and they all, notice the woman pursues the judge, the tax collector cries out to heaven, and the parents come to Jesus. They're all coming forward in not aggressively, but assertively, right? They're all beseeching the judge, they're beseeching heaven, they're beseeching Jesus, but they all come powerless. So we have powerless people praying. And what happens when powerless people pray? God listens, right? God answers the powerless. And if you flip the story around, we're going to get to the other side of the story in a minute there. So we have the powerless widow beseeches justice, God answers her. The powerless tax collector beseeches and he gets mercy. The powerless parents and the powerless children beseech and they receive the kingdom. So I think one of the keys Jesus says is that powerless people pray. Because if you think you're powerful, do you pray? Why would I need to pray? Right? I've got this in control. I've got this under hand. I don't have to pray. I've got control on this, right? Praying is a powerless place, and yet is it powerless? Not at all. Because powerless people get heard by the one who gives justice and mercy and the kingdom together. All right, you see how it all connects? All right, we're going to go across the line now into what I'll call tonight, three living illustrations of these three teachings on prayer. Powerless people pray. 18 to 30. Lena, are you up for reading? 18, please.
And a certain ruler asked him, saying, Good master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?
Very good, thank you. So what is he doing? He's, in effect, he's praying, right? I need eternal life. What must I do? All right. So he's asking, what do I need to... Is he asking the right question? No, because Jesus just did this whole thing on prayer that people who are powerless get their prayers answered. He's saying, what do I do? No, because now he's a good student of the law, because the law says you must do. So he's not asking a bad question, but he's not asking the right question. What did Jesus just say in verses 16 and 17, what you must do to receive the kingdom?
Be like little children.
Be like little children. And what do little children, what powers do they possess? None. What can't they do, right? They're useless. Like, to be honest, they can't do much, right? So they can't do. So Jesus has already answered the question. So the man, had he been listening, now we don't know if these two stories are in the same breath or if there's some span between them, but let's just say he had just heard Jesus say, be like a little children to inherit the kingdom of life. And he comes and says, so what must I do to inherit? And you could almost, and again, I'm presupposing a fair amount here, but you almost hear Jesus going, didn't I just say what you were supposed to not do or be like? Anyhow, that's a big assumption on the text, but I like that idea. And what does he call Jesus? Good. That's a big word, right? Because in the context of the law, no one is good. There is none righteous, none that seek after God. No one is good. Good is a quality that God alone possesses. And this is the only time that Jesus gets called the good teacher. This is a radical statement. And so what Jesus does is he forces him to reflect on good. You can almost see Jesus bringing, oh, good. Let's talk about good for a minute. Because what does he say? Henry, in verse 19?
Jesus said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone.
So this is a characteristic that belongs to God alone. And he says, so why? Let's talk about goodness for a second. All right, let's define goodness. Shelley, verse 20.
You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony. Honor your father and mother.
Good. What do all 5 of those commandments have in common?
Not supposed to do it.
Okay, you're, those are, not supposed to do it. Good. Yeah, there are nots. What else do they have in common?
Their actions towards other people.
Their actions towards other people, right? They have nothing to do with God. They're all about, they're the 5 commandments in regards to how you treat your neighbor. Okay, so Jesus says, well, what is good? Why do you call me good? What good should you do? And Jesus says, do you do it? He says, yeah, I've done all those. And he's quite happy with himself, doesn't he? He says, yeah, I've done all those things since I was a young man. Well, that's, so far, so good. Basically, the man knows how to treat his neighbor. But he neglects what's the other half of the commandments. If there's 5 commandments about treating your neighbor, what are the other commandments about? How you treat God. So far, what's he neglected? How he treats God. All right, Jesus says, and do well, Shelley, verse 22.
When Jesus heard this, he said to him, you still lack one thing. Sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me.
Good. So, he has neglected what God required, which was to sell. He's achieved man's standard of righteousness, but he hasn't achieved God's standards of righteousness because his wealth has made him not connected, as it were, to God. And so he doesn't get his treasure in heaven. He is not enters the kingdom in heaven. And he hears these things and he becomes very sad, for he was extremely rich. He had done that which is required of his fellow man, but he had neglected what God had required of him. And this leaves, and Jesus gets to the heart of the issues with him. And then what does Jesus do in 23 to 25? He exaggerates a bit. How hard is it for those who are wealthy to enter the kingdom of God? Because who gets to enter the kingdom of God? Children. And what don't they have? Money. They're dependent, right? For it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Much has been made of this. Some people say there was a gate called the eye of the needle, and the camels had to get down on their knees, and there's all kinds of possible explanations. I think Jesus is just being funny. He's just exaggerating for the sake of, exaggerating for the sake of the issue, right? For the sake of humor. Yeah. So, can you get into heaven by being good? No, despite the fact that the man had been good, but he had neglected the true goodness, that which God. He had done that which his fellow man required, but he had not done that which God requires. No one has hope of salvation but through God alone. So things don't go well. But poor Peter. Peter gets his chain rattled on this one. Ethan, you want to read 28 and 29?
Peter said to him, "We have left all we had to follow you." "Truly I tell you," Jesus said to them, "no one who has ever left home or wife or brothers or sisters or parents or children for the sake of the kingdom of God
May as well read 30 as well, it's context.
will fail to receive many times as much in this age and in the age to come eternal life."
Good, thank you. So what does Peter cue in on?
He goes, hey, we left everything at home.
We left our wealth behind to follow you. What do I get out of this? Right? Poor Peter. What Peter says, and what does Jesus reassure him? Yeah, he says, don't worry, Peter, you're wealthier than you think. Yeah, don't worry about it, Peter. I know what you've given up for me. Don't worry. You're far wealthier than you could have ever possibly imagined. And this rich young man was far poorer than he could possibly imagine. He thought he was wealthy in the things of God. Turns out he was poor. Peter says, but we're poor in the things of earth. And Jesus says, you're wealthy in the things of God, which in the end will make you... He doesn't talk about wealth, but he talks about relational wealth, right? He says, don't worry, you'll get back what you've sacrificed for me. And he reassures Peter. There's a wonderful little human moment there. All right, so the rich young ruler prayed for what?
Eternal life.
Eternal life, right? I might have these mixed up here, but we'll connect the dots eventually, right? He prayed for eternal life. And he wanted justice, right? He said, I've done good, therefore I should get life. If you get what you deserve, that's called justice. If you don't get what you deserve, we talked about what justice is, right? In a sense, he was asking for justice. God should be fair. What do I do? If I do this, God should do this. So I want to put you tonight that the rich young ruler was actually praying for justice. God should be just and fair. He wanted the balance in his favor. He would put in good deeds, and God would give him eternal life. And Jesus says, here's the problem. What have you put actually on this side of the scale? Nothing. So that he said, Jesus says, well, if you want justice, there's only one way to even up the scales. So I want to put you on the other side. Unlike the widow who prayed for justice and got justice because she was powerless, the rich young ruler was powerful and asks for justice, and what does he get? Nothing. He gets squat, so to speak. All right, next story. Oh, we got a little pause here. Then because Jesus says in verse 30, the eternal age to come, eternal life in the age to come. And then he jumps into verses 31. He says to the 12, he took the 12 aside and says, behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and all things which are written through the prophets about the Son of Man will be accomplished. For he will be handed over to the Gentiles, will be mocked and mistreated and spit upon, and after they will scourge him and they will kill him. And on the third day he will rise again. But the disciples understood none of these things, and the meaning of this statement was hidden from them. How could they not understand that? If you just read that face value. I'm not sure why they missed that, because it seems pretty clear.
The meaning was hidden from them.
Yeah, they were not able to see the meaning of it. Yeah. So there's always these little addendas. Throughout this passage, there's these moments, and Jesus says, and the age to come, and the kingdom to come, and my sacrifice to bring about the kingdom to come. So woven through like a tapestry of these teachings on prayer and the illustrations of what prayer looks like is the kingdom and the coming kingdom and the price of the kingdom all get woven through. So if you think of this like a tapestry of the prayers are written in red, as it were, and these illustrations are written in blue. There's these golden strands woven through of the kingdom and the sacrifice, just highlighting it, if that metaphor fits in your mind. So this is one of those little golden strands weaving the story together.
I mean, I just was thinking, we've heard this story many times. So we get it.
Yeah.
They just heard it once.
Yeah, this is the first time, like, one of the early times.
They've never seen it written, probably.
Yeah.
They haven't studied it in Bible study. So maybe they, just didn't get it.
And they're expecting the Messiah to be very different, right? They're expecting to usher in the kingdom and glory, and Jesus is correcting, the age to come. We talked about it last week about the different ages, right? And so when they thought about the age to come, they thought about the Messianic age. And Jesus says, yes, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking the Messianic age and its glory and wonder and beauty, but I'll let you know the Messianic age must be ushered in through this. So he's correcting their eschatology, their sense of future events. Yeah, it's a tough correction though, because they want the glorious age, and the glorious age only comes through the blood of the Lamb. It's a tough price to get to the glorious age. Yeah. All right, 35. We're doing great. Your Bible may say whose name at the start.
Bartimaeus.
Right. You'll notice that the text actually never includes that. That's from Matthew. So your Bible may say Bartimaeus receives his sight, but Luke doesn't record Bartimaeus' name.
Blind beggar.
Yeah, the blind beggar. That's who he is.
And what's his name?
Bartimaeus. Like Bart, and then Iameus. It's just about every vowel you can think of. Aeiou. Aeus. Bartimaeus. Yeah. In Greek, if there's an S on the end of the name, it's a masculine name. If there's an A on the end of the name, it's a feminine name.
Oh.
So Diana, Donna, Brenda, Linda, Felicia. What other female names? Lena. Myrtle. Merla. Yeah. So, and then if you look at male names, it's Paulus and Apollos and Crispus and Jesus and Marcus, and that was an S on the end. So you can tell male from female that way.
It's like French.
It'd be handy nowadays with all the different names.
I know you'd have to. Well, there are neutrals in Greek as well, so you could just use a neuter. You could use a neuter pronoun. You could use a neuter pronoun. Yeah. And we see that in Greek too, because the pneuma, the spirit, has an A on the end, but it's actually neuter. It's a neuter noun. But when later on in Acts, when Peter says, you have lied to the Holy Spirit, and he uses masculine pronouns on a neuter name. And that doesn't work in language. If I said Joyce was going to get Oreo cookies and it picked up bananas, you'd probably be offended, right? Or if I said Joyce was going to get cookies and he picked up, but you say, no, he, and that doesn't work. That's called grammatical concord. The words aren't in agreement, and so Scripture breaks concord to make a point. So it's the spirit, pneuma, which is neuter, but then it's always a male pronoun. So I think it's a theological point made through a grammatical tool.
But then the people that say that Jesus is a female aren't looking at the grammar.
No, the grammar certainly puts, and every pronoun, and yeah. Now there's a little bit of play with the spirit being female in Ecclesiastes and Ecclesiasticus and the Song of Solomon and the Wisdom of Solomon, because sometimes wisdom is seen as a woman. We saw that in Proverbs, right? Wisdom is often seen as a woman, and yeah, I'm kind of getting off on it. But in the prologue of John, in John chapter 1, he quotes part of that statement. And so sometimes the Spirit is viewed as the feminine side of God. I'll leave that with you. But Scripture doesn't present the Spirit as a feminine. It always uses masculine pronouns. So that is that more confusion than truth? Probably. All right. Scripture uses masculine pronouns for the Godhead. God is always masculine, and Jesus and the Spirit are all given masculine pronouns, despite breaking grammatical concord. It's one of the questions on the ordination interview, by the way. So if you ever get ordained, you've got that answer. Grammatical concord, Acts, you can answer that one pretty quick. What I did my first accreditation interview, you got to do this exam called the Junior Bible Exam, and you got to take it as many times as you wanted to get the mark you want. And I don't know what I got, like 85. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. It was kind of typical Dan, middle of the road. And I did okay. And guy who's interviewing me, he said, so how many times did you try to get that one? I said, I don't know, once. And he kind of looked at me funny. He said, well, because the last guy tried 5 times, chuckle, chuckle. I said, Sunday school paid off. And then he called me Sunday school boy the rest of the interview. So, Sunday school boy. So, Sunday school boy. Sunday school pays off. Bible study pays off. You now know about grammatical concord and the pneuma, which is probably more than we learned in Sunday school. All right.
Always learn something.
Yeah, there's always something new. And it either reinforces or challenges us. All right, so Bartimaeus, Bartimaeus, masculine name. Jesus, another masculine name. As Jesus was approaching Jericho. All right, along comes this no-name man. A blind man was sitting by the road doing what he could do. He's begging, right? He was saying, I beseech you, I pray, give me money. It's about prayer. Now, hearing a crowd going by, he began to inquire what this was. He hears all these voices, these people. What's going on? What's going on? And they told him in verse 37. What do they tell him? Right. Jesus, that's the crowd. And he does something interesting. He doesn't call him Jesus of Nazareth. What does he call him in 38? Son of David. This is a messianic title. The Son of David was one of the terms of the coming of the Messiah. So he gives him a nice messianic name.
Well, he obviously knew his lineage, huh?
That's right. You knew who he was dealing with, wasn't he? Yeah. And what does he cry out? Does this sound familiar? Who tied out? Exactly. The blind man cries out for mercy. Just like the tax collector. And the tax collector is humble, and the blind man is humble. The tax collector has no power. The blind man has no power. Don't you love adult education? The answers are there for you, right? There's a parallel. The widow cries out for justice, and the scales of justice are tipped in her favor. The rich young ruler says God should be just, but the scales of justice are not in his favor. The tax collector cries out for mercy, not for justice, and finds in humility that which he is given. The blind man does the same thing, just as the tax collector does, and he receives the same thing the tax collector does. Son of David, have mercy on me. And verse 40 is wonderful. And Jesus stopped. They're walking, the crowds, and Jesus stops. There's a great moment. You can if you're shooting this movie like a movie, right? You can hear the crowds, the dust, the noise, and you can hear in the background this voice, Son of David, have mercy. Amongst all the people, what kind of crowd is this? It's a loud crowd, right? Hearing the crowd and Jesus hears that one cry from the crowd. And it's not the voice of anybody else, right? Everybody else is probably, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And he hears, Son of David. All of a sudden it's different. And he stops. It's a very dramatic moment. And he stops and he commands the man be brought to him. The man is crying and he brings him forward. And he says, 41, what does Jesus say?
What do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do? All right. This is a wonderful little moment. The answer to this question will determine what he thought about Jesus. So Jesus says, what do you want me to do? If he thought Jesus was a teacher, what might he say?
Teach me what I should do.
Teach me what I should do. Yeah, teach me the way to go, right? If he thought Jesus was a prophet, what might he say? Show me the way, perhaps, yeah. Give me a sign. But what did he believe Jesus was? The Messiah, the Son of David. And so he expects him to do what? Heal him, exactly. What we think about Jesus will determine how we answer that question. If Jesus were to say to you tonight, what do you want me to do for you? What we think about Jesus, what we believe about him, what we hold him to be, will determine how we answer that question. We might say, I could really use $1 million. Okay, so that's what you think I am, right? Anyhow, if Jesus, this question I ask when I read this, how would I answer that question if Jesus asked me that tonight? What do you want me to do? Well, Jesus, here's what,
But Jesus is all those things, right?
Precisely, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
whatever we're feeling at the time.
I'm not sure, no, that's, yeah. I think it depends on the circumstances too. Yeah,
Whatever we need for that day.
yeah, whatever we need, yeah. It might be just daily bread. But in this case, it reflects what the man believed about Jesus.
Yeah.
Because the man believed he was the son of David. And he says, verse 41, I just want to see. Those of us who wear glasses, surely we can, that's what I'd like, thank you very much. I just want to see. And Jesus says, verse 42, you are now healed. What does he do? Does Jesus put mud in his eye? Does he?
Nothing.
Nothing. He just says, go receive your sight. He says, your faith has made you well. Now, did faith heal him? No, Jesus healed him, right? Faith was the means of him receiving his healing. He received the healing through faith, but faith was not the instrument of his healing. Faith was the avenue through which healing entered him, but it was not the instrument by which healing came. Your faith has made you well, and I love verse 43. And immediately he regained his sight, and he began following him, glorifying God, and when all the people saw it, they gave praise to God. The blind man prays for mercy, and what does he get? Mercy. One last story. This one crosses a few lines. Zacchaeus, you could connect the dots on a couple of levels, but I put it up against the parents and the children. All right. Where are we up to for reading? We'll start fresh here. Shelley, 19, 1 and 2.
Jesus entered Jericho, and in chapter 3, a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy.
So, what does this story sound like?
Sounds like the rich ruler.
Sounds like the rich ruler, the tax collector story, right? So you can see there's some parallel structures here. But Zacchaeus is not just a tax collector. He's the chief. He's taken a cut out of a cut out of a cut. This is a pyramid scheme, and he's at the top, right? This is a very wealthy man who's also very despised. And I like that 19, and he was rich, just to clarify that. All right, Ethan, verse 3, please.
He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd.
Good. So it's funny, it's a contrast to the blind man who can't see Jesus, who's sitting at the road, and Zacchaeus can't see Jesus, so he stands up. Like, it's just a neat, I don't think there's necessarily a parallel structure here, but as a piece of literature, the two kind of meet, really. I don't think it's a big deal, but I always think the two are interesting contrasts. One is blind, one can see, one is short, one's sitting, one's standing, and they're both trying to see Jesus. But because he's short, and we'll all sing together later on, Zacchaeus was a wee little man. So, what does he do? Verse 4, Ethan, you're doing great.
So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since
Good.
Jesus was coming that way.
So he's smart, right? This man is a man of he's entrepreneurial. I can't see. He books around ahead, finds a tree, scrambles up. So now he's above the crowd, who look down on him all the time. There's a little irony in this too, right? The man who was looked down on because he's a tax collector now looks down on them. And what doesn't he do, unlike the blind man?
He doesn't call out.
Doesn't call out. He's just sneaky. He's hiding in the tree, or maybe sitting. I don't want to read too much, but he's just in the tree. And what does Jesus do? Exactly the same thing as he does to the blind man. He stops and he calls. The blind man called him. Zacchaeus is not calling him. He's just curious by the sound of it. But Jesus does. And again, we see Jesus walking along, and all of a sudden, you must have been a real, like, if you were trying to get somewhere with Jesus, can you imagine? Do we have to stop every 2 minutes? And so you could talk to somebody? That sounds like spending a day with someone I know. We can't get anywhere because we've got to stop and talk to people everywhere.
Kids.
Yeah, exactly. Taking him through the mall. It must have taken Jesus a long time to get anywhere, because it seems like, he was always stopping to talk to people. And he looks up, and he says, verse 5,
Hurry and come down. Today I must stay at your house.
right. And then the song says, I'm going to your house for tea, because we had to make it rhyme with we. But, hurry down, hurry and come down. Not just come down, but hurry up, get down here right, for I am going. So the poor disciples, they're walking on their way to Jericho. They got a plan. Okay, we're going to have supper here, we're going to have lunch here, we've got a plan. Jesus says, nope, we're having lunch at Zacchaeus' house. All right, the GPS is reprogramming, now, I guess this is what we're doing. All right, he's the master. Off we go.
Zacchaeus is ready to feed Jesus and all his followers,
Yeah, well, Zacchaeus is,
he's wealthy, I guess, but it's like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be ready to have 25 people.
exactly, yeah. Oh, surprise, surprise. His wife said, I wish you'd stop bringing your work home with you. And he hurried down, and he came down, and he is happy. He received him gladly, but the crowds, the word is mutter, exactly. They saw it, and they all began to grumble, saying, he is gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. Bad, Jesus is in trouble here. And as they're going, they're having, they're interesting. It says Zacchaeus stopped. We're not even at the house for dinner yet, right? They're just walking. It says, and Zacchaeus stopped. If we do this time frame, Jesus says, we're going to go to your house. And they hurried, he came down, and they saw it, and then Zacchaeus hits the brakes. And what does Zacchaeus say?
Gonna give this half of his possessions to the poor.
Yeah, I'll give away half. And if I've defrauded anyone, and that's one of those third-class conditional clauses, or since I've defrauded people, or first class, I will give them back 4 times as much. Now we need to do a little bit of digging here. Go to Leviticus, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, chapter 6, verse 5. Okay, Joyce, you want to read 6 verse 5?
Or whatever it was he swore falsely about, he must make restitution in full, add 1/5 of the value to it, and give it all to the owner on the day he presents his guilt offering.
So how much did you have to pay back for restitution if you lied or defrauded someone?
5 times.
Not 5 times.
1/5.
1/5. You have to pay back the full amount plus 1/5. Zacchaeus pays back 250%. Right? He pays back the amount. He says, I'll pay back 5 times. So he pays back the amount plus 4 times on top of that. All right, go to Numbers 5:7. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers is the next one. Numbers 5, verse 7. Where are we up to? Shirley, do you have it?
Yeah. Somewhere.
We'll give you time.
We just don't want to.
No, that's fine.
Should have something to wet my finger.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, everything's dry, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, I'll get it. 4 or 5, somewhere in here. And you said verse 7?
Yes, please.
Sorry, I can't, I just, this. Okay, it says here, he must make,
Yep.
he must confess the sin he has committed.
Yes, you're
He
correct.
must make full restitution for his wrong, add 1/5 of it, and give it all to the person he has wronged.
Okay, so what's the law say if you've wronged someone, defrauded, how much you're supposed to pay back?
1/5.
1/5. 1/5. Okay, we're almost done. All right, go to Exodus 22, Genesis, Exodus 22, verse 1. Myrtle, 22:1.
If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep.
So Zacchaeus pays back 5-1. Now we're back into this neighborhood, right? So if you steal, if you steal an ox, you got to pay back how many ox? 5. If you steal a sheep, you got to pay back 4. Maybe that. So Zacchaeus is now back. We're into the neighborhood where Zacchaeus is living. He's paying back oxen for oxen, 5-1. This is probably the closest we get to the command that Zacchaeus is living under. One last one. 2 Samuel 12, verse 6. That will give you a minute to turn to. Right after Ruth, 2 Samuel 12:6. Now Zacchaeus hadn't stolen a sheep or ox, he had defrauded. 2 Samuel, verse 20. 12, verse 6. He must make restitution for the lamb 4-fold because he did this thing and has no compassion. All right. So, well, the law required 5-1 for oxen. That doesn't fit Zacchaeus' situation. The law fits with Zacchaeus under Leviticus 6:5 and Numbers 5:7, where he is to pay back 1/5. But Zacchaeus goes the full yard. He goes the full oxen payback, and he pays back 5-1. He is zealous for repentance and righteousness. All right, and verse 9, Ethan, I think I just get you to read. Joyce, did I get you to read yet, Ethan?
Yeah, I read.
Okay, sorry. Joyce, could you read verse 9 and 10?
What? 19.
Sorry, back to Luke 19.
Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost."
All right. What did Zacchaeus find? Salvation. In essence, he is now a member of, and Jesus describes it in verse 9. How does he describe salvation? As being what? Son of Abraham. Yeah. Zacchaeus was an outcast. He was not considered a son of Abraham because he worked for the Romans. He would be considered an outcast. But Jesus said because of his repentance and his humility, he is now a son of Abraham. He is now in the kingdom. Right? So contrast that with the children. Jesus said if you want to get into the kingdom, you've got to be like a little child. Right? And what are some of the characteristics of little children?
Powerless.
Sorry, Sean?
Powerless.
Powerless, innocent,
You're humble.
humble. Yeah. What do we see Zacchaeus acting like? Think about him. Think about this whole story. What's he doing?
Like a child climbing a tree.
He's like a child, right? And he's little. I'm not going to read that too much into that. But maybe there's a tiny bit of weight there, He's childlike, right? And he behaves like he runs along, he climbs up a tree, he jumps down and says, "Great!" Just says, "Go to your husband," and he says, "Great, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay everybody back what I owe them." And there's a childlike nature to Zacchaeus in the story that we don't always see. There's a, sorry, Sean?
Well, that's great, but Jesus didn't ask him to pay it.
Not at all. No, there's piety there, right? And humility and brokenness. And I think there's a childlike quality to Zacchaeus' character. And he just says, whatever it takes, if that's what you want. And Jesus didn't even ask. He says, "I've got a great idea. I'll just pay everybody back."
He must have felt guilty before that.
Oh, I'm sure. And what do children often feel? Great guilt, right? I think there's a parallel between the parents bringing, and Jesus saying, unless you act like a child, you won't receive the kingdom, and those who are childlike receive the kingdom, and the character of Zacchaeus, who acts childlike. There is an innocence to him, or a longing to be innocent, although he feels, he's got great remorse. And he receives salvation. All right, this is we're at an hour already, but this is my thought for you tonight as I put these together. I think what we have here is 3 teachings on prayer, and then 3 parallel events that illustrate the nature of what a prayerful person is. So we begin with the widow who cries out for, by the way, we'll get to Zacchaeus. We'll return to Zacchaeus in a moment. The woman cries out for what? justice. She is persistently cries for justice. The tax collector humbly prays for mercy, and the parents, what do we say? Faithfully, that's the word we used.
Parents.
The parents faithfully ask Jesus to bless their children. The widow receives justice, the tax collector receives mercy, and the children receive the kingdom, or they are citizens of the kingdom. And I think these three other stories are parallels on many ways. We could connect the dots, and we'll see how a few. So the young ruler who comes, and maybe I'm forcing his story the most, but I think he comes and says, the law, justice, I want what's coming to me, and he doesn't get it. He's an example of the wrong kind of praying, how not to pray for someone, as it were. The blind man, I see his parallel so clearly in the tax collector who cries out for mercy and receives mercy. And Zacchaeus, who in humility and childlike obedience doesn't even cry out, but he receives the king. Now Zacchaeus is also, by the way, opposite of the tax collector, right? The tax collector who he's the opposite of the rich young ruler who has wealth and doesn't know what to do with it, whereas Zacchaeus has wealth and knows how to use it. But that doesn't fit my little motif for tonight. But does this make sense? I mean, I wouldn't build a theology on this, but I think it's a neat way of looking at the stories, right? That those who are humble and persistent receive justice. The blind man, like the tax collector, receives mercy. Zacchaeus receives salvation, just like the parents, the children in the other story. So if we were to look at these 6 stories tonight, what do we learn about prayer? Persistence.
Pray like a child.
Pray like a child. Yeah. Humble.
Ask for what you want.
Yeah.
Not what you need.
I want and need mercy, right? Yeah, I want and need justice. I want and I need to be in the kingdom, right? Those aren't wrong prayers. Yeah, very good.
I don't think we should give up either.
Yeah, don't give up. Keep praying. Be like Zacchaeus. If you have to climb up a tree to pray, go pray on the top of a tree. You know, persistent. You know, if you need to sit on the side of the road, pray. Pray out loud. You know, be like the blind man. Yell if you have to. If that's your prayer life. And it is the powerless, persistent, humble, childlike people that enter the kingdom, receive mercy, and discover the justice of God. So, all right, any thoughts on this? We will look at the last lesson next week.
Probably not what a lot of people would say if they study that, right?
No, it's probably, yeah.
It wouldn't be like they would say.
I think I force it a little bit, but I think there's legitimacy to see prayer in all those stories, yeah. For sure.
I just wanted to say thanks. I'm glad you came along, partner.